All right, are we ready to jump in?
Yeah.
Cool. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for the two of you being here. If anyone has any questions as we're talking or wants to chat, feel free. You can do that with the chat function. If you look at the bottom bar of Zoom, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my voice right now. If you look at the bottom bar of Zoom, you can see there's a chat symbol. You can click it and you can type stuff in it. So feel free to do that if you want to do that and join our conversation that way. And then in a little bit, we'll open it up and we can have a group conversation, which will be really fun.
Yeah.
Cool. So how are we doing?
Good. Starting the day off well.
Sweet. Usually I'm used to talking to one, but now I'm talking to two, which is cool. Mm-hmm. Can both of you give me a real quick intro to you as individuals? It would be really fun for people to learn a little bit about you and who you are.
Yeah, I think Nour is doing some technical troubleshooting right now, so I'll start. My name is Christy Casey. I am the founder of a company called Ruse, and I specialize in immersive and interactive entertainment. And specifically, I focus on work where the audience participants play an active role in the narrative. So we always say, you don't just see the story, you live it. So I come from a theater background, so I usually identify as a theater artist, but the work that I do now doesn't fit within the normal definition of theater.
Right.
And I focus on bringing agency to the people who come and show up for the show. And I love it when the main character of the story is played by an audience member. That's my favorite work to do. So, yeah.
Sweet. And Nour, are we back?
Yes, we're back.
How's mom doing? Is she figuring it out? No, we want you in.
I know, but I think
technology does not like me.
I can hear you through Nour's stream, I think.
Yeah. So I decided to call my mom and have her on speaker because this is the earliest. My mom is in Amman, Jordan, and this is the earliest time I've done any programming that she can be there for live. So
wow.
I'm really, really happy that she's here. Thanks, Mom.
I'm happy that you're here too.
Yes.
Thank you. Proud of you, Nour and Christy.
It's nice to finally meet you and see your face.
Okay. So
anyway.
I've seen you before, so and you've been doing a great job. So inspiring. Your work is amazing.
Aww, thanks.
Congratulations, really. God bless you. And I hope that you guys will be famous in the future, near future.
I'm sure they will be.
What, Mom?
Can you hear the sirens?
We can't hear the sirens, just your voice. The sirens.
It's curfew time in Jordan.
Oh, wow.
Because of Corona. Yeah, we're not allowed to go out now.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I didn't realize they had sirens. But yes, I wish I could be with you, Mom, but it's gonna virtually right now works. And I'm glad that they're taking things really seriously in Jordan, and the response to COVID-19 has been very efficient, and they have martial law.
Yes.
So it makes me sleep better at night knowing that my mom is safe. So my mom is also a theater artist and pioneer, if I may. She introduced theater-based education and interactive theater, and not just in Jordan, but in the Middle East largely, and created theater as a pedagogy and looking at how we're dealing with some of our community's most complex issues. So theater for social change is my mom's career. And
wow.
Yes, and I've been very, very, and she started as an actor as well. So I'm very, so my work with Disruptivist was inspired by her, and my father is also an artist. And yes, so I grew up literally on the stage. There are pictures of me being 2 years old with my mom rehearsing, and she played. They created the first musical. Sorry, I'm going to talk about my parents. They
That's
created
great.
the first musical in Arabic. Mom.
The Wizard of Oz.
Thank you. The Wizard of Oz, and my mom
Wow.
played. Yes, and they created music from scratch for it in Arabic. So it was, that was really cool. And my mom played Dorothy, and so there were some really cool pictures of that. But anyways, I grew up in a very artsy home, which I'm very, very grateful for. Because so my career has been mostly in the nonprofit sector around youth empowerment and education, mostly for I worked in different places around the world in nonprofits, and currently I part-time teach nonprofit management in the Masters of Science in Nonprofit Management at Columbia University. But 2 years ago, I decided to create Disruptivist, which is growing a network of artists as activists around the world that are to amplify essentially the power of the arts as a tool for social change. Having worked with the private sector, the public sector, and government organizations, I always felt that the arts needed to have a larger seat at the table, or generally to have a seat at the table when we talk about some of our most complex issues. So that's how Disruptivist started. And we had a series of conversations in New York with artists. We did a residency at Art Cafe and Bar here in Brooklyn, where I talked to artists about the work they're doing to disrupt the status quo, whether it's gender constructs or gender inequality, or using storytelling to disrupt narratives of hate and xenophobia. So, and I also want to give Ari, who designed all the Disruptivist artwork, a shout out. She's amazing. And we also both collaborated on an event in New York before she moved to Berlin on disrupting the climate crisis, which also was like my first real introduction into using the arts as a way to elevate the conversation about climate change, which brings me to how Christy and I met. And we are both Disruptivists and Roots are co-producing Resilience 2032, which is an alternate reality experience that takes place in the year 2032, 12 years from now. And it's centered on the story of a US presidential election. The year 2032 also happens to be 2 years after the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN were meant to be due.
Yeah, so when that project was, the early seeds of that project was a play test that I did when I moved back from Austin. I was part of a think tank in Austin, Texas that was specifically putting audience members in protagonist roles, which is how I sort of went from doing immersive work with a little bit of interaction to like really focusing on how the audience plays a central role to the story. So I came back and I was like, okay, I have no money because I just spent 9 months not getting paid. I have no team because my team was all in Austin and now none of them decided to come back to New York. What do I do? So I wrote this like 15-minute one-on-one piece that was about, the participant got an email from the leader of this activist group saying that they were trying to investigate a politician. And then they expected to be meeting that activist leader, but instead of meeting that activist leader, they met the wife of that politician that the activist group was investigating, and got the flip side of the story that they expected. So it was this 10-minute piece that was all about like, how do we decide who we trust and what's true and what's important? And that little seed of an experience became a much larger project that has now it's changed a lot since its early days and now has a much larger purpose. But it was based on this, like, asking questions about why in our current political sphere and in so many spheres that we'll see people being so black and white about situations that aren't black and white, and sort of trying to probe participants to like peel back their assumptions. And then Nour and I met at a women's entrepreneurship financing meetup workshop course that like I totally felt out of water in as an artist. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make money with what I'm doing. And I was apologizing for like being there left and right. And I started explaining to Nour, I mean, I like, not really like, but like with my body language, I was just like, I'm here talking about money, but like, I'm an artist and none of you are going to get what I do. And then I told Nour what I was doing, and she was like, actually, this is like everything that I'm trying to be working towards. And then a couple weeks later, like we were trying to like get back in touch, and a mutual friend of ours, Jamie, who's now a major advisor for us on the project. He's been helping a lot with the strategy of how we're unfolding content. He was like, "Oh, you should meet Nour." And I was like, "Wait a second, I've already met Nour." And it was sort of this like really weird small world experience where it was like, oh, you mean this person that I needed to meet all along is someone that I randomly met at this
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool. It's like, even if we didn't meet at that New York City event on financing, in a past life I co-founded a platform for financial inclusion, and which is why I was there. It was a social enterprise, and so if we didn't meet then, we would have met through Jamie, who we now officially call our time traveler in residence.
Nice.
Yes, because this is a futurist project and we're trying to immerse people into an alternate reality that takes place 12 years from now. He's been kind of helping us travel between the present and 12 years from now. And he's someone that's kind of I would say a generalist, where he always has his finger on the pulse of so many different things that are happening. His background is in advertising. And we both met because we both served on the board of a nonprofit that no longer exists. We tried to save the Cornelia Street Underground Cafe, if you're familiar with it, in the West Village. That was essentially the home of like Bohemia in New York City, but we couldn't save it because capitalism. But yes, that's how Jamie and I met. But so yes, I think it has been really exciting, and to see how resilience has kind of grown from our first conversation to this moment in time. It's been almost 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And we just had to pivot once again because of COVID-19.
Right.
But maybe like Matthew, do you have any specific questions? I feel like we might be.
We're just like storytelling.
No, storytelling is great. It's what people need right now. I think stories are super important. I was just curious, sort of. I'm imagining the experience of someone who doesn't know resilience, or did Resilience 2032, and they're unfamiliar with immersive theater or improvisation or some of these elements that you're talking about and incorporating into this large project. And I wonder if you could, in like one or two really simple sentences, describe what an alternate reality game is and what it's like for people to be a part of it.
Yeah. Do you want to?
I can go ahead. Yeah, I'll start, and then you, because we usually have different approaches of I think explaining it, but together, when we're together explaining it, it makes sense. So this is so I would say that this alternate reality experience is going to unfold on social media, in the same way that you are currently monitoring the presidential election, for example, in the US, or in the same way that the news cycle unfolds on social media. You will be able to watch and participate in a story that is unfolding on social media, but 12 years from now. We have been referring to it as social media theater.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really simple way to describe it. So you are having people think
Mm-hmm.
on social media. You'll have actors or
Yeah.
players that are posting things on social media as if they're in
In the year.
2032, dealing with all the many things that are going to be needing to be dealt with in that time period. And so people can follow along at home or in events that you throw in public, to experience what life might be like in a reality that will happen in the future, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're essentially throwing an alternate reality skin over our current reality politics. And we use social media theater both because it's unfolding on social media platforms that exist, but also because social media inherently is interactive and is asking people to create their own content. So that is a really big part of how we are designing the experience, is for participants to be able to create their own content and share their own content that becomes part of this alternate reality. So we will be designing a meta narrative of putting out news articles and presidential campaigns of like who those candidates are and what the reality that we're all co-creating together will build the framework for people to understand where they're coming. But we're not the only ones creating content. The goal is that anyone who sees the content that we're putting out can create their own and be inspired to actually play a role in the story.
Yes.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a lot of play of people making believe and thinking about what life will be like in 2032. Is this just for fun?
Mm-mm. So I think this is it's not at all. I think this is a good time to kind of explain.
There's always a motive behind all of these things, a political motive. And yes.
I love it that
I love that your mom could join in. my mom is also watching, which I'm really excited about.
Hey, that's so great.
Hey, this is like the family call. We all have our moms.
Also, my basically sister.
Hi, moms.
Hi, moms. Yes, and my sister from just joined us as well from Jordan, and and so many good friends in New York. We're in Cara, Angie. I love you guys. Anyways, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the structure behind how we decided to the whole like the journey that is this experience and when this experience will go live. So initially we're going to go live in August. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to answer the question about the larger purpose behind the project first?
Yes. Well,
is it part of it? Okay, it's part of it. Okay,
it's
sorry.
Part of it. No, it's part of it because in looking at what does the year 2032 look like, we realized there are a lot of things that we need to unpack, and we need to talk to experts and thought leaders and futurists who have been contemplating and speculating what our future could look like. And specifically, so I mentioned earlier on the call that we chose the year 2032 because it happens to be 2 years after the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were meant to be due. So the UN has 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are, if you've heard of the Millennium Development Goals, they were set by the UN back in 2000 that included certain targets around quality of life, whether it was access to water or issues relating to climate change, the future of work, gender equality, and many more. So in our project, we decided to focus on 3 main pillars, 1 being climate change, 2 being the future of technology, and specifically machine learning and data ethics and everything that all the issues that come along with data and technology that affect our present, but will also be affecting our future. And the 3rd one is systemic inequality, or inequality generally. And so these 3 main themes that are very much interconnected, but we think we chose to focus on. So this entertainment experience essentially is inviting people that might not be very engaged in these issues, or there are a lot of young people between the ages of 18-year-olds right now in this country that really aren't engaged in the US election, for example, or don't really care about voting in this election because the system has failed them. We had the opportunity to talk to some young people through you, actually, Matthew, at the door, where it was made very clear, and through other volunteering opportunities with nonprofits that are working with underprivileged youth in the US, that issues around climate change aren't really issues they are paying attention to, or the election. So we decided to kick off the 2032 conversation series, where we talk and unpack these issues on a deeper level with experts, and that's been where what we've been doing, and now currently continue to do every Saturday at 2 p.m. EST. We are trying to unpack these issues. So the idea behind the experience is to get more and more people engaged and paying attention to these issues that are affecting not just our futures but our present.
Yeah, and I think for me was like I've always in my work been thinking about like how can we bridge the world of like for good and purpose-driven work with entertainment. And I think that that's a really important element to be reaching these audiences that aren't paying attention, is because like they have other things that they're dealing with in their life, and thinking about political technical things is just a lot. So if we can wrap it in this nice little nugget of like a fun, entertaining experience, we can reach an audience that isn't currently paying attention or prioritizing those things. So the goal is to create an experience that looks and feels like something they want to be engaging with, and use that as a tool to bring awareness to these larger global issues.
So just to kind of distill some of the things that you were saying and see if I got it right. I'm pretty familiar with the project. I'm just thinking about my mom and dad who are watching. I want them to be able to get it. Some people aren't always very active in politics or in social issues. And so by creating a fantasy that's in the future, we can have a better way of understanding the issues that are really important now. Because sometimes it's really tough to think about inequality and underprivileged people and the things that they go through in the context of this is happening right now. But if we add a layer over the top that allows us to think about the future and what that might be like, it's sometimes easier to think about these issues and how that future might not be what we want. And then we can do things now to change it. Is that about right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. So can you tell me a little bit about futurism in general? Because it's like this big thing that, was it something you were fascinated with before? Or is it something that, like why did you choose to do futurism? Anyway, just talk a little bit about futurism, if you don't mind.
I think we both have things that we could add to that. I was not really that into futurism before doing this, but I was in my process of planning this experience. I knew that I wanted to do a future election in writing this like first little draft project, because it was inspired, I guess, more or less by the way people engaged with the 2016 election and the psychology that I saw coming out of people with social media silos being a really major player in our current politics, of like people that are very right only seeing one set of news and people on the left seeing a very different set of news, and how we've sort of divided each other when there's probably a decent amount of overlap in like global goals of like we all want to be economically stable, but the way that we're looking at these things is just so different that we're fighting each other.
Right.
And how can we overcome that? So I knew that was like the seed of why politics, and why the future was because, well, the past has already unfolded. So if I wanted to create an experience where participants were creating this creating what's happening, it had to be in the future. So futurism as a study sort of came out of the process of writing this project for me. And since then I've uncovered this really great gold mine of like all of these amazing things. We just recently found some research from the Institute for the Future, or they didn't conduct the research, but it was an article that they had published that was saying that they conducted research about how many people think about the future, which was like something like only 53% of adults think about the
I
future.
just pulled it up, Christy. I'm going to read it out.
Great. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a futurist thinking deficiency. 53% of Americans say that they rarely or never think about the far future. 21% report imagining this future less than once a year, and 32% say it never crosses their mind at all. So studies show that people who don't think about the future vote less often, save less for retirement, make poor health decisions, procrastinate more, have a harder time resisting temptation, care less about long-term challenges like climate change, and more likely to drop out of school or be arrested, and more.
Wow.
So yeah, and for me, I think even on a personal level, and the way that I been making decisions about my career and what I want to be doing with my time and my purpose, I found that thinking from the future generally and giving yourself the ability to imagine possibilities that the systems in place around you force you otherwise, or like would limit it. Like it's much easier to be like, no, that's never gonna happen, you know? Like if you came to me 6 months ago and you told me that I would be right now producing an alternate reality experience that takes place in the future that has given me access to communities literally all over the world, then I would have said no way. Or if you said to me that in creating this alternate reality experience, we talked about the possibilities of about trying not to be dystopic in the narrative that we wanted to unfold in the year 2032. And we talked about pandemics, especially when we talked to our climate change experts and looking at the year 2032 through climate science, we talked about how the possibility of pandemics because of climate change was very, very likely. And our future would most likely have pandemics. And we discussed it and said like, no, we're not gonna have a global pandemic. It's gonna be too dystopic and too dark. And then here we are, living a global pandemic, and we were like, all right, we need to I guess that dystopic future we were really worried about that would kind of be off-putting for people, they're already living. So like, let's pivot and include it into, and use it as not use it as a way, but I mean, it's like, it's changing, it's changing, it has changed life as we know it. Life will never be the same for so many people, and it's exposing privilege in a way that we wanted to expose in our project as well, and access. So there are a lot of people around the world and in this country as well that are being affected by this on a very different scale, right? Our very frail health systems in this country are being exposed in a way that, like, talking about universal basic income right now is going to change whether we like it or we don't.
Right. So let's take that as like a kind of macro, very large view of what Resilience 2032 is and what's going on. Both of you are obviously wildly creative people to craft something so large with such amazing like foundations underneath. I wonder, can you talk, and then I would like to open it up to everyone, but I kind of want to bring it back towards like on a smaller scale, like what are things that you do that are smaller that keep you creative every day? Or is this like the thing? Is this all you're doing? Or are there like little creative things that you do every day that keep you going that other people can do too?
So I like to, I guess I feel like on a regular basis, cooking is a creative thing that I do.
Yes, totally. Yes.
And I usually only do it if I'm hosting other people. So now this isn't happening, but I just recently started hosting people for dinners more often. Before before all this happened and before I started traveling. Yeah, so cooking is one of those things. I also have a habit of making earrings on airplanes. So it seems to be a thing that, like, whenever I travel, I'm like, all right, I'm going to bring my crafty things and make some earrings. So that's a thing that I do. I don't know.
Do you give them to people that you fly with or anything like that?
No, usually the motivation is that, like, I want something fun to wear while I'm wherever I'm going.
Got it.
So it's like the act of, like, oh, there's a time and a place that I want this thing for that motivates me to do it. And this is a bit of like, I was supposed to make a pair for Nour, and I have a really great design in mind that like I'm excited to make, but it broke on me. Like, I was having trouble with the wire wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So it's been a longer process that I owe her earrings for.
Yes, I was going to say, where are my earrings?
I also owe my mom earrings because I ran out of earring hooks at Christmas time. I have those earrings with me, but they still need, I'm on the other side of the country.
Speaking of making stuff on planes, I'm just going to screen share something really quick. I had someone draw me while I was sleeping on a plane.
Wow.
And this is that drawing of me.
Wow.
And then she gave it to me after I woke up, which was really funny and weird.
That is funny. Pretty good, I think.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, not bad.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I felt good about it. Or what
So
about you? Something small that you do that's creative every day, if you do it.
I just received from Amazon a box of paints and canvas and brushes.
Nice.
So I'm about to start painting more and more. And I have to say, Najla, who's on this call, her and I she is a very talented jewelry designer from Jordan. Check out her work on Instagram, Najla Asim. And we both spent 6 months together in Florence studying jewelry design.
Wow. Najla, do you think that you could put your Instagram and website information into the chat so anyone interested in checking it out can go check that out? That would be really cool.
Yes.
And again, for people tuning in, if they're unfamiliar with Zoom, you can go down to the bottom of your screen where it says a variety of different things like mute, stop video, invite, and then there's a button called chat. You can press that. I don't know if there's anything in it now, but there's about to be a website to an artist, and you should check that out.
Yes.
So you're going to paint. That's exciting.
Yes. And this week I was reminded, there's a book called The Artist's Way. And I was reminded that, like, creativity is basically about creating something new, from whether it's guided by curiosity or by possibility. Just creating something from scratch. Even if you create an action, like, that's still creating, or you interrupt fear and decide to replace it with an action, like, that's apparently creativity. So I think that because when building Disruptivist, it was like, okay, are we a community of artists or creatives or activists or artivists? Like, there was all this discussion about the terminology. And I think, like, I feel creative, everybody can be a creative, and that's the thing, right? Like, the arts are not meant to be for the elite, or meant to be for the few that, like, study art. It's supposed to be something that like, it should be a human right where you have access to the arts no matter what, where you come from, or I think it's part of culture and humanity, and if we are not engaging with the arts, then how are we, like, evolving? And I think that so everybody is a creative and has the opportunity to be a creative, like, every day, in whatever way they would like. But
well said. Yeah, I hope that, one of the results of these conversations is I hope that people can think about the different ways that people use their creative inclinations, and the just myriad of possibilities that there are for people to be creative. It can be something really small like painting or drawing or writing or, creating actions like being happy and trying to get someone else to be happy through an action. Or it can be something super large, like creating an alternative reality in 2032 and then getting people to think super creatively and be a part of that.
Yes.
So
Before
what do you guys want?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, what do you guys want to do next? Do you want to open it up? Do we want to do like a resilience activity? What would you like to do?
I just wanted to very quickly, before we open it up to questions, just to mention how cool it's been to collaborate with you, Matthew, because I don't think many people on this know that you're a really cool artist and created an awesome post-it installation in the subway that was your what most New Yorkers know you for. But we had the opportunity to work with you and create the "When was the last time you were resilient" installation in the subway when people were still taking the subway.
Yeah, right.
So but it's been, I think and I was reminded in working with you on that project and just like all the other adventures we took through the Make Believe project and like stopping people in the streets and the whole Art Plus People, which is something we all have in common, that was that how simply asking someone to write something down on a post-it note and giving them opportunity to like the space and opportunity to do that in public space was very disruptive in a way that was necessary. And I think that that simplicity is important for us to remember as we create art as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna do another screen share here so that people can see. So we went out into the subway together to do this project where we wrote, when was the last time you needed to be resilient, to get people to think about resilience and what it means to be strong and what are the things that people need to be strong about. And then people wrote things like this. It's about being bullied in high school and pretending it was normal for years. And so people had the opportunity to think about resilience in a lot of different ways. And I think that we tried to get people to think more immediately, but people ended up talking about these much larger topics, which is really great because resilience is in the ideation phase where, anything that is pulled in can be used as fuel for this alternate reality, social media theater, because it's really important to get a myriad of different experiences and voices into an experience like that, because in 2032, the world is certainly going to be, at the very least, as diverse as it is now, with as much inequality. I mean, it would be great if there was less, but my assumption is things will probably be more extreme in the next
I think some
decade
things
or so.
some things will have progress on, and some things will be way more extreme. So we're gonna play with that. You'll find out soon.
Do we want to open it up so people can ask questions?
Alternative reality.
Yes. We're opening up for questions. Lena, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The question? First I want to thank you all for such an amazing and inspiring platform for expression. And I thought that what you're doing through resilience is, and the alternative reality, is basically giving people the opportunity to express themselves and to use their imagination, something that people stopped doing because of our digital era, where everything is at the press of a button, and the computer and the social media, all this technology does it for you. So people, I'm not against technology, don't misunderstand me, but I'm saying it did have an impact on youth who were born using technology all their lives and depending on social media to pass on their messages. So we stopped using our imagination. And what you're doing is stimulating people and giving them a platform to actually kindle their imagination and imagine what the world would be like in the future. I mean, the statistics you mentioned are alarming. 52% don't think of the future. That's very alarming. And what you're doing, actually making that try to understand what would life be. It's like preparing yourself for any challenges, anything new that whether positive or negative that can happen. So people start thinking more loudly. And what I wanted to say is this corona challenge and this pandemic is the benefit of it is that it makes people think to find ways to protect themselves and to protect their communities in the future. It's a lesson that we have learned. Mm-hmm. We have learned to reflect, on our situation, to rethink our alternatives. And this is futuristic is preparing us for the future, preparing us for any challenges that might come up, not only wars, but also issues like pandemics that we have never witnessed ever in this century. I mean, it's what an amazing thing to happen, where the whole world is is united in attacking or fighting one deadly disease. So that's one thing I wanted to say about the importance of the platform that you are using, and also the magic if. We use it in drama in education when we work with young people or we train teachers. It is a magic if, because if we don't say, what if I were in someone else's shoes, doing this and that, what if this and that happens? So it is an active way of thinking, really. It's a creative, active way of thinking, which we are lacking in our educational systems, in our homes. This kind of communication, live communication, has declined. So theater and drama are extremely powerful tools in stimulating, if you like, human interaction and understanding of the challenges we have, and the cross cultural kind of understanding of diversity and what it means, inequality and what it means.
Yeah.
I talk too much. You have to stop me.
No, I won't. I just I can tell where Nour gets some of her powerful energy and essence from. That was really wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to have you on the show next week sometime.
Yeah. She's a powerful artist. Yeah. I want to seed something before.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Did you just as feel free to ask general questions, but we don't have time to do a 2032 exercise to get to imagine something specific. But I want to put out there, if you have something that you're curious about the future, we'd love to hear what questions you have so that we can incorporate that into who we're trying to pull together for our 2032 research series. So if there's anything that you're like, I wonder if X technology is going to be part of the future, or I wonder what the impact of whatever is, sharing those questions and curiosities would really help us in our research process to know what you all are curious about.
Yes.
Cool. Any questions about the creative process, about creating immersive theater? How about futurism and what it means to create experiences in the future for the change of now? If anybody wants to, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you can just talk whenever you're ready.
It's Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Hi.
Hi, sorry, I'm multitasking, but I have a question in terms of, have you experienced any challenge versus sort of the immediate action of basically taking action during this time of COVID, and sort of the uncertainty or implications financially, economically, socially over the next 6 to 12 months versus the idea of futurism. I'm just wondering if you've kind of stumbled in a challenge where people's minds are technically in this sort of first set of immediate actions, and sort of is there challenges to think about beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we've talked a lot about, especially as we're trying to accelerate our timeline to offer. The experience wasn't supposed to go live until August, and now we're trying to get a smaller version of the project up as soon as possible. So we've talked a lot about like how are we presenting this in the midst of our current crisis, and as we've been talking to and being part of other futurist conversations, I feel like people are kind of craving a place to talk about something beyond our current circumstances, and to talk about like how can we be looking towards the future in the midst of a present that's daunting. And yes, there's definitely a lot, and I think that like there's a parallel that's happening of like we can address the present by looking to the future. And that's always been part of why futurism is like we're looking 12 years ahead so that we can reflect on what actions we can be taking now. So looking to the future is actually more about the present than it is about the future. And I think it is, some people who are just trying to get by day to day might not be ready to jump into that yet, but I think that it will. It's actually an encouraging tool for the people who have been able to make that leap, to be able to think beyond the current circumstances. So we hope that like, as we continue to share this project, that it becomes that sort of creative safe haven in the midst of these times.
Yeah, very well said. I would just add that like the science behind futurism and speculative thinking and speculative design is essentially like prototyping the future to understand the present. So that's it's like as an exercise for people, like thinking of yourself, maybe not necessarily 12 years from now, but like by the end of this year, like where do you want to be outside of everything that's happening right now in your life, and picture that, and then trace back the actions you can take to get there, is essentially like applying speculative thinking and future speculative design and futures thinking to like our own personal journeys as well.
One thing I'll add to that though, of like a year from now versus 12 years from now, this was something that I learned from one of Jane McGonigal's speeches, who she's a game designer and a futurist. And the 10-year mark is something that futurists use a lot, because 10 years away is far enough that there's a wider range of possibility that you can like imagine a very different world 10 years from now. Whereas something that's shorter than that, it starts to feel more daunting, because it's like, well, how can things change in that short of amount of time? But 10 years is like 10 years and a little bit beyond that. So that's why we're at 12, is the point where you can start to see a wider range of possibility and a larger change in the world. So that's why we chose that year point, is to open up that world of possibility in the imagination.
Any other questions? People can jump in.
I like your dance.
Thanks. You know, it's always good to dance, get some movement. I think people right now are probably struggling with lack of movement. I have a bunch of friends that are having all these different health problems from not moving around. So, you know, you can wiggle on a Zoom call. Why not?
I actually am really surprised that when you asked about like other artistic expressions, dance has been a huge part of my life for a really long time. And I didn't mention that, which is weird and kind of funny.
Yeah.
I almost want to say that conceptually, when people think about being inside, they're probably crafting a fantasy narrative of like, I'm trapped inside. And there was this great line from like Dracula show on Netflix that was out lately, and you know, he's in like medieval times, and then he like goes to sleep, and he sleeps until modern day, and it's in like I don't know, mid 2000s or something like that. He ends up in this house he's trying to like, you know, whatever, escape these police that are trying to chase him. And he ends up in this house that's just pretty normal, and the people that live there are probably like not even super well off seemingly. And he's like, what king lives here? And the woman that's there is like, what are you talking about? And he's like, a king must live here, like everything around is grander than anything I've ever seen ever. Like there must be some royalty living here. And the woman's like, what are you talking about? This place is a dump. And you know, around us is wealth and possibility and technology, and we can still order paint supplies and all these things. So anyway, I know people feel like they're trapped inside, but like you can totally still dance and do all these things that make you super happy.
I think my mom is walking around the house for like 30 minutes a day, right, Mom? Like inside.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, what you guys are doing is visionary. You know, when you allow people to say, or give them a platform, a creative platform to think of the future, it's you're asking people to be visionaries, to speculate what might happen in the future, negative or positive, so that we are prepared to address these challenges. Like with the coronavirus problem now, we have learned how to prepare in the future for online learning for schools, you know, so that students don't sit at home and do nothing. This is what Jordan is doing, at least, you know, finding ways of online learning. We have learned how to create videos by editing them from home and filming with mobile cameras, etc. So it's teaching us how to deal with things in the future. It's fantastic. And what I wanted to ask you is, how do you, Nour, Christy, and Matthew, how do you see the future in a few years' time? How do you see things happen? I know, Matthew, you were pessimistic about it, but
specific to our work, or like just future as a whole?
The future. I mean, what we're going through with this pandemic, I think we're, you know, analyzing and learning new things, and we're hearing of conspiracy theories, and we're hearing of so many things. The whole world is connected, you know. It's amazing. Yeah. And the challenges we face are all the same. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys, you as artists and creators and young people, I'm very old, but how do you see life in 2 years on your platform, you know?
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, like, this is why 12 years in the future, because there's so many like major variables within the next 6 months that will drastically change which future we're living, that 2 years from now can be harder, I think, than 10. But go ahead.
So I think I have an interesting perspective on this because the nature of my work has changed so dramatically. Mm-hmm. Almost all of the projects that I do are in public space, and I've been spinning this narrative of, you know, people are online. Online is this toxic place. People really don't connect very well through the internet, even though we're in this golden age of communication and possibility for connection. The internet's still not the right place for it. And while a lot of people have swung into the digital realm, companies and brands and otherwise, there's still such an amazing opportunity to use that technology that we have in public space. Like, as an example, I have this telephone that collects secrets. And so you can pick it up and you can tell a secret. Yeah. I can't imagine somebody picking up a telephone in public space, like a telephone sitting on a table, even if it looks super cool. And so if I'm thinking about, okay,
you could leave hand sanitizer and wipes and they can like disinfect it.
Totally. So you could do stuff like that. Or, you know, if you have a sticky note installation, so like thousands of people will participate in these sticky note installations that I do. So, okay, I'm probably going to need to be better about leaving hand sanitizer for people, or having something like that so people can, you know, wash it or something like that. Because in a year from now, I'll probably be able to do this work again out in public space, and people will be hungry for in-person experience.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's probably going to be PTSD that people have now that's going to make people hesitate to do things in the future, like people walking around with a free hug sign as an example.
Mm-hmm.
People in parks all over New York have these signs that say free hugs, and they walk around hugging strangers. If I saw somebody doing that now, I can't even imagine, it irks me thinking about it.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that some of those, more like fear-based or protective thoughts, they're probably going to pervade into the way that people think about public space for a long time after this. I have a feeling for like 1 or 2 years. And so that time frame actually probably fits a period of time where people are going to be reeling from this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one path. Or people just, there's a cure, it's gone, and people just go the absolute other direction. People are like hungry for it. They're hugging everyone. I don't know. Those are the two paths that I can see for sure for me.
I totally agree with those two paths, specifically in response to COVID. And I think either path I see, and I'm definitely biased because this is everything that I base my work off of, and you as well, both, all of us, interactive and incorporating the audience and participation into artwork and giving people a voice. I think we've seen an evolution of entertainment and people wanting to be part of the artwork. And that's something that's increased from like the dawn of the internet to now. And now most everyone has tools in their pocket to be able to create content and contribute to work. So I think more and more and more, we're going to see a lean towards artwork and entertainment where the audience isn't just a passive observer, but they get to be part of it and seeing a demand for that kind of work. Where they get to have a voice, because like having a voice is also something that's super pertinent in our world as like activists, of like who has a seat at the table, whose voice is contributing to the conversation. So I think that will be a big part of our near future.
Yes. And I think in looking at trends, Generation Z is definitely that generation that's very much about co-creation. And about having their own voice and making their voices heard, but also, I think agency is a big feature, I guess, of Generation Z. And I think as their role in shaping culture grows larger and larger, like I think we're gonna see that as well. I mean, generally, big picture, I think I really hope, then we talk about this, I mean, outside of resilience, but I really hope that in the future, women are much more equal in society than they are today. Like, I really want that this, on a personal level, for 12 years for now, for us to be living in a much more gender equal world.
So while I'm thinking about the future and let's say that we're sort of maybe the future of art and things of that nature. I know that somebody on the call is very good in the education realm because she's been working her whole life in it, and that's my mom. I don't know if I can get her on, but I'm going to try because I want to ask her a question about the future of education. Mom, I have unmuted your microphone, so if you talk, or Dad, whoever's on the iPad, Mom, are you there? This is Gandhi.
Yeah, I am there. I am here. So great to see you, my son.
Hi.
And it's been also so wonderful to listen to everyone's comments. I think this idea of resiliency and the future, and I love the fact that you backed it with data and statistics. So that's a really fantastic process. So it's been really interesting for me to listen to this.
Gandhi, I wanted to ask you a question specifically about the future of education to get people thinking about what that might look like, because for at least from my perspective as an artist, I don't actually talk to a lot of educators right now about what the future or even the immediate reality is like. And so I'd actually be really curious to hear, you know, what, I know people are kind of taking education online in a certain way or just canceling school altogether. Can you imagine a future where schools are either not around, or are they shorter? Like, is this an opportunity where people can, just, I'd be curious of your thoughts of like, how do you think education is going to be different after this time?
That's an interesting question because, technology has kind of, and the virus has forced the hand here in the sense that, we are still doing.
We might have lost her. We'll see if she comes back. Oh, are you there? Are you back?
Okay. So what I was going to tell you is that we have kind of been forcing the hand. I shouldn't say this virus has forced the hand. Our schools were closed. We found out on the 13th of March. And so on 16th, schools were closed in the county that I teach in. And so immediate discussions began to happen, and we began to put plans in place for starting our classrooms either online and then reaching out to our parents and students that are, and for me, that were on my caseload. I'm a special educator. So it's created a lot of challenges, and some of the issues that you guys are bringing up, the fact that, who has internet access, who doesn't have internet access, who has computers in their home so that they can do their online learning. So these are all issues that every state is going to be grappling with as we are kind of moving through our shelter in place. And so for me, school will not be resuming as we know it in the hopes of until May 3rd. So one of the things that I think is really important is that, I've spent a lot of time reading and learning about the development of young brains and language acquisition. And there's something very, very powerful that happens. There's a theorist, his name is Vygotsky, that says a lot of our meaningful interactions occur within these social interactions. And so, for example, if you have a young child and the child smiles at you, the parent or whoever the caregiver is, smiles back. And that does something really amazing in our brains. Our brains are geared for language. And especially as we're young and we're growing, our brains are geared for these kinds of meaningful social interactions. And so, one of the things that I've always been concerned about is an over-reliance on technology. And so, the other part of it too is that we are now entering a different era. And so for students who are disengaged in education, I think this is a really great opportunity. I mean, we've been talking with our other teacher friends. Maybe this is going to give us a new and fresh look about how we do business. But I do believe that we can't remove the social interaction. I've talked to so many of my students, and they say to me, Mrs. Chavez, I miss seeing you. I miss hearing your voice. I miss their laughter. I miss
sweet.
I miss their silly stories. And I set up a Google Classroom. And actually at home, I do a lot of talking about my family because I think it's really important that we have, that I have an established relationship with my students. And I think relationship is key. And I think sometimes that's what's missing when we can just quickly go to a text and we don't have to deal with people's, the way they look and interact with them in a physical kind of, in real time, in a physical kind of way in our presence. And I agree with you, Matthew. It's really going to change how we interact with each other in public. As far as education, the schools that have all their students have iPads, all their parents have access to internet. It's not going to change for them because those experiences were probably already occurring anyway. I know what's happening with us is that, computers, Chromebooks are going to be provided for the students, for some of the, for students. And our internet services where I live are offering, free internet. I don't know if they've established hotspots, but we're kind of,
we're starting to see some of that. We're starting to see some of that stuff starting. There are different spots that are providing free Wi-Fi or internet to homes that don't have it. It's certainly a future that I can imagine where an entity steps in to bring internet to individuals that don't have it. I mean, the scariest part of what you're talking about is that immediately the most impacted young people are ones in families without internet and aren't receiving any of these services. So it's probably going to exacerbate the inequality that exists now, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's happening now is that we're trying to address this. Yeah. So, for example, one of my
which could be a good thing in the future, right?
Yeah, and also the interaction with parents can be very powerful because, and I'm thinking of one student in particular where we scheduled a meeting and simultaneously I was walking through the process of how to access the Google Classroom. So I have a grade level range of kindergarten through 5th grade. So, depending upon, the skills of the students, depending upon their familiarity with Google Classroom per se and other opportunities for, a virtual classroom, which we are kind of in the process of developing right now, is going to be unique to each person. And yet, when I talk to parents, they're excited about the fact that, wow, she called. And I talked to my center daughter about this. So I think it's going to be different. I mean, you guys are digital natives. So for those of us that are not digital natives, I mean, certainly we had technology in our home when you were growing up, Matthew.
Yes.
But we also had lots of other opportunities that just wasn't around a video game, right? And so I think this is expanding people. And so I think education is going to be different. My hope is that we continue these positive social interactions because we know, it's changing how we interact with people because it's just so much easier to, send a text. So, but I'm going to wrap it up now because I have to go. Consider this my break.
Randy,
go ahead.
I wanted to say, I hope that that our communities value educators and teachers so much more than they did before this, because it's showing how much our communities are dependent on teachers and how much, I know how important, how big of a role teachers play in our youth's futures. So I really hope that people respect and we salute you and all the educators that are doing the hard work. And especially in New York City, some of our schools provide 2 meals a day, which are the meals that these children depend on. And some of the schools are still providing those meals for kids, but it's it's showing how much our education systems are holding our communities together. And so, yeah, I hope that we value you much more in the future than we do now.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you brought that point up, because even in our district, the food programs are still continuing, and so they can get, so there hasn't been a discontinuation of those services. So, you know, my hope is for everyone in this panel, and Matthew, and those of you that are living, you know, in the middle of this, especially in centers where the population is dense, that, you know, that together we can all be safe and be healthy and strong and continue our work, because it's so valuable, and what each of you are doing is valuable.
True. Thanks so much for providing that insight, and I'll talk to you later, I'm sure. Why don't we wrap this up? I would really like for people to be able to know where they can follow Resilience 2032, because like Gandhi said, and like we've been saying, it's super important for us to find outlets for creativity and for getting through this together. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to do that. Can you walk us through? Yeah, you could also screen share. I don't know if you have the website up. I have it up, so I can screen share it. But if one of you want to do that.
You have our website up?
I have Resilience 2032 up, if we're ready to do that.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes.
Why don't we do that? Okay.
Sure.
So can you tell people where to find you?
Yeah, so we're resilience2032.com and at resilience2032 across platforms. So if you search at resilience2032 on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, it's us. You're going to find us. So that is where we are. So this is our Instagram.
And they had a fantastic conversation on Saturday that I was a part of. They had a really great group of panelists that talked about even if you're not super interested in, you know, alternate reality games or even understanding that side of the project, just being a part of these panels where they have experts talking about now and in the future is immensely fascinating. So I highly recommend checking it out.
Yes, so we'll be having those conversations every Saturday at 2 p.m. EST. So please do join us on Saturday. And then on Wednesday of this week at 1 p.m. EST, we are doing a workshop. So we've been hosting also create-a-thons as we collectively as a community prototype our 2032 reality. But this Wednesday, we're going to do a workshop specifically around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and using the power of imagination, perspective design, futures thinking, and imagining our everyday lives in the year 2032 through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you can join us this Wednesday at 1 p.m. And Annie, who asked a question earlier today, I wanted to thank her for that. She also works at UNICEF and is in their communications team, and she is one of my best friends anyway. And so is Cara and Ari. Thank you guys all for joining, and Camila. So yeah.
And on that note for the workshop, I was trying to publish it before we got on this call, but I'll publish it immediately after we hang up, the event page on Facebook for that. And our Facebook events is probably the best place to be keeping up to date, is because we'll always be publishing our public events there. So we're on all platforms, but Facebook events are an important one to be following.
Great. For anybody that is interested in checking out more Art Plus People stuff, you can go to, let's see if I can do this efficiently. You can go to artpluspeople.com. On there, there's a resource for creativity. There's activities and things you can do. There's some community stuff for artists and freelancers, working from home, fitness. Essentially, Art Plus People is a community that's creative for everyone, and also a support network for artists and other people that are interested in doing different things. This is Creative Lunch, where we get together and don't have lunch physically, but we munch on tasty ideas. so that we can keep our brains nourished and our creative body going. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with Tanya Shika. She's a really amazing illustrator. And so each day, there are completely different artists that provide different experiences that people can see, and you can watch broadcasts. So you can go to artpluspeople.com, and you can go to artpluspeople and follow us on Instagram at artpluspeople. Nour and Christy, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure talking with you. And I'm a part of Resilience 2032 as well. So I'm really excited that I've had the opportunity to be a part of these conversations and do sticky note projects and get people thinking about stuff. I have a feeling we'll do a resilience related sticky note project next week, which I'm excited about doing. We should totally do that.
Don't go out.
My mom is saying don't go out in public. No, it's going to be virtual.
No.
Virtual.
We won't be doing sticky notes in public. No,
public.
It's all virtual.
Virtual
Thank you
projects.
so much. I'm really excited. I also, this was so special because all of our moms, Vicky is also.
Yeah, I want to shout out my mom.
And it's so nice to meet you, and my mom who's joining us from Jordan. We wouldn't be doing what we do or who we are without you. So thank you.
Ma, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm multitasking too, sorry, but yes, hi.
I love you.
Super moms. I love it. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.